Multiverse of Madness is a movie where expectations really matter, because not everyone is going to enjoy it. Sam Raimi's first entry in the MCU succeeds in a lot of ways, but for the average moviegoer who isn't familiar with his style and quirks, the movie will likely come across as confusing and off-putting. Regardless of the foreign style and poor pacing, however, Raimi crafts a compelling character narrative that impresses and surprises the audience with an engaging dark tone. Complete with an amazing original score from masterful composer Danny Elfman and some fantastic CGI, Multiverse of Madness definitely wasn't a forgettable experience. In this video, I'll take a look at the genre, the two main characters, and the narrative of the movie, breaking down what works and what doesn't. There will be spoilers, so skip to the timestamp for the conclusion in the description if you'd like to see the spoiler-free summary on what I think. Alright, let's get started. When I saw that Multiverse of Madness would be directed by Sam Raimi, I was immediately excited. As a big fan of his Spider-Man trilogy, I was excited to see what he would do in the MCU, especially because he was working alongside the composer of the Spider-Man trilogy, Danny Elfman. Raimi is known for his horror background, which is apparent even in the Spider-Man movies. The way he portrays his villains and uses the camera really gives insight into that background, and nothing has changed in Multiverse of Madness. In fact, the horror aspects are intensified. And while I wouldn't say the movie was scary, I would definitely still give credit to the creepiness factor. Raimi relishes every moment with an evil Wanda, portraying her as a psychotic yet restrained mother bent on getting her family back. There's a liberal amount of scenes with Wanda hunting down the heroes and ripping apart some along the way, demonstrating exactly what she's capable of. Strange reanimating the corpse of his multiversal counterpart and harnessing the spirits that try to stop him is super dark and spooky too. Overall, Raimi excels at embracing a tone that hasn't been utilized thus far in the MCU. Another one of Raimi's signature moves is his use of symbolism and key lines of dialogue. Spider-Man 2 is truly his magnum opus in this regard. The character journey of Peter Parker is one of the best in the genre. Throughout the movie, Peter grapples with the true cost of being Spider-Man. He struggles to come to terms with the fact that being Spider-Man means giving up his dreams of having a normal life, and everything that comes with it. There's a fantastic line of dialogue from Aunt May that encapsulates what the great power, great responsibility line really means. Raimi does something similar with Steven's character in Multiverse of Madness, which we'll discuss more in depth in the next part of the video. But the important thing to note is that he plants a specific line of dialogue that is repeated later in the movie, and it takes on new meaning.
It was my dream.
Sometimes
to do what's right, we
have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most. Even our dreams.
The question, "Are you happy?" is incredibly simplistic, but carries a lot of weight in light of Steven's character arc throughout the movie. Additionally, the symbolism of the watch that Christine gave to Steven is pretty interesting, as the watch is something that almost every version of Steven treasures and has a connection with. Unfortunately, with Raimi's strengths also comes his quirks. His stylistic choices are something I can definitely appreciate and enjoy for their own sake, but the question here is whether they contribute to the film in a way that makes it more cohesive and benefits the story. His dialogue is campy, and it's the kind of writing that you can never quite tell if it's intentionally funny or just unfortunately cringy. His goofiness is apparent, and while sometimes it's funny, equally as often it's immersion-breaking and confusing. Some lines of dialogue can feel so out of nowhere that they pull the viewer out of the experience and remind them that they're watching a movie. So while Raimi's strengths are apparent, so too are his quirks that may not fit well in the MCU. But in my opinion, this is still a much preferable route than making a movie that feels too familiar and cookie cutter. After a plethora of movies in the past 5 years with appearances from Doctor Strange, it was time for the next installment in his personal journey. He's had roles in Ragnarok, Infinity War, Endgame, and No Way Home, but obviously none of these movies focus on his character that much. And while we've seen plenty of other characters grow and change throughout the past half-decade, Doctor Strange has remained relatively the same. With Multiverse of Madness, Raimi had the responsibility of drawing the focus back on Steven and telling the next chapter of his story not only as a hero, but as a person, which, in theory, is what Raimi excels at the most. So did he succeed? I'd say yes, but with a few areas of missed potential. Let's start with the good, though. In Multiverse of Madness, Steven's character development is smartly grounded in a core figure in his life before his superhero journey, Christine Palmer. Steven still loves Christine, so attending her wedding raises a lot of questions for him about his life. Christine raises one question in particular, however. She asks, "Are you happy?" For Christine, this question is merely small talk, and the audience will at first interpret it that way. But as we think about what this question means in light of the setting of the movie, it comes to mean a lot more. Both Wanda and Steven's internal struggles revolve around things they've lost. Wanda, her family, and Steven, Christine. Unlike Steven, Wanda seeks to reclaim what she lost through the multiverse. The multiverse is a really clever plot element. It captures the idea that somewhere out there in a different universe, a version of you is happy. The dreams Wanda has had over and over again cement this idea in her head, and she comes to believe that the only way she can be happy is to find the universe where she has her family. And while Steven doesn't take things as far as Wanda, it's clear that he isn't happy without Christine, and part of him is still stuck in the past. It's also clear that the question Christine asks carries a lot of weight, because other versions of Steven mention the same event happening in their lives. This part of Steven that is stuck in the past, holding on to his love for Christine, is represented by the watch she gave him. This is also something that is significant to other versions of Strange, one version even making the watch a key to entering the space between universes. The watch remains broken throughout the movie until the very end, where Steven comes to realize that being content with the present, despite all that he has lost, is the only way to move forward. He replaces the watch face, and we see that he's ready to move on. My only complaint with Steven's character arc in this movie is that it's a bit too subtle. Steven doesn't feel like the main character in this movie, Wanda does. Her internal struggle is intricately explored, while Steven's struggle is mentioned more sparingly. I'm not against a movie that focuses on Wanda, in fact I'm very much for it. She was definitely the highlight of the movie for me. But when a movie is named after one hero in particular, I think we as an audience expect them to get the main focus. However, despite its frustrations, this odd distribution of focus doesn't detract too much from the movie as a whole. I was not a fan of WandaVision, which I know might be a bit controversial. Despite functioning as a clever completion of Wanda's origin story, I thought the mixing of extremely different styles hurt the show, and its rough pacing and weak climax made it feel like a flop. I never really found the show funny, and I think Paul Bettany is the only actor I found comedically talented. But most of all, I disliked it because of the ambiguous ending where Wanda doesn't face any consequences for her actions. After the writers shifted the blame away from her onto Agatha, it felt like they were throwing away the perfect opportunity to make Wanda transform into a villain. Wanda's story in WandaVision is the perfect origin for a villain, but because of the way the show ended, it seemed as if they had copped out at the last second because they didn't know what they wanted to do. So it was my incredible joy to see Wanda set up as the antagonist in Multiverse of Madness. Redemption arcs are some of the most compelling, but personally, I often find a character's descent into darkness equally as interesting. Especially in the MCU, where heroes rarely become villains over time. If anything, we've seen the reverse trend of villains like Loki slowly becoming heroes. And with all that pain Wanda suffered, it makes a lot of sense that she would start to lose her sense of morality. So after WandaVision completed the transformation of the Scarlet Witch, it was Multiverse of Madness' job to decide who the Scarlet Witch was. Did it succeed in making her a worthwhile character and villain? The answer is an emphatic yes, with only one or two small issues. One potential problem might be the fact that we don't see a lot of Wanda's descent into evil. We don't see the individual decisions and choices she makes that slowly change the kind of person that she is. Coming from where WandaVision left off, the version of Wanda that we see now makes sense, but we are left to fill in the gaps to how she came to where she is. This issue might be attributed to the poor pacing of the film, whereas more time might have allowed for Wanda to display more of a progression in her evil nature. Despite this, there are many facets of her character that they nailed, so let's take a look at those. Firstly, I was super impressed by how they didn't water down Wanda's powers. Where there might have been a temptation to try to decrease the scale of Wanda's strength to make her a more balanced foe for Steven, they decided instead to portray her at full power. This helped make her into the scary, intimidating villain that she is. The scene where Wanda massacres the Illuminati is terrifying yet captivating, and it demonstrates just how far she'll go to get what she wants. It's unexpected, and until that point we hadn't seen Wanda do anything that extreme, but her extreme actions stem from compelling motivations, which helps balance her character out and show that she has reasons for what she does. The MCU has taken time to flesh out her character and build her into the villain she is now, which immediately makes her a more substantial villain than most. Another thing that adds depth to Wanda is understanding her relationship with the multiverse. As previously mentioned, Wanda deals with her losses by searching the multiverse for happiness, with a complete disregard for the other versions of herself that are out there. The multiverse comes to represent discontentment with Wanda's reality, which gives us a lot of insight into the desires of our characters to find happiness, while simultaneously showing how selfish Wanda has become, going so far as to be willing to kill or control other versions of herself to get what she wants. Finally, I love that Wanda isn't defeated using the Book of Ashanti. It would have felt so much less climactic for the conflict of the film to be solved through getting a spell that's strong enough to overpower her. Instead of this, the film uses a clever choice to bring Wanda back to her senses. America gives Wanda exactly what she wants. She brings her right to her kids. Wanda perceives herself as a mother who wants to be with her children, but seeing them acts as a mirror that reveals that she's really become a monster. They react with horror, and Wanda realizes how far she's gone. Just as Wanda was the one who started all of this, she was the one to end it. Her sacrifice in the end feels like a fitting conclusion to her character's journey, and in that end, she is able to find some semblance of redemption. This video doesn't cover all my thoughts about Multiverse of Madness, particularly regarding the extremely weak character of America Chavez. But overall, Multiverse of Madness is good, with fantastic elements like the focus on developing the main characters, valuable symbolism and themes, and a fantastic score and presentation. It's held back, however, by confusing and uneven pacing, and Raimi-esque elements in the dialogue and story that may lose some viewers in their rough translation into the MCU. Overall, however, a Marvel movie that embraces its director's vision and steps outside the normal conventions is well worth watching, and it's still much more appreciated than the standard style we've come to expect. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Leave a like if you enjoyed or dislike if you didn't. I'd love to hear your thoughts, opinions, or criticisms of the movie down in the comments, so head on down there and let me know if you think this movie was a success. Thanks again for watching, and have a pleasant day.